Good morning and peace be upon you this beautiful day wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Qasim Rashid, and this is the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. My friends, thank you for continuing to tune in. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your emails, your notes, the folks who are sending me feedback on what we can do better. I particularly appreciate. I had a few folks email me and say that I need to get a better mic, and I will. My producer Alexa is awesome, but I need to get her better content in terms of video or audio quality. So I'm going to work on that. But keep the messages coming. Let's keep the conversation going. Particularly appreciate when I get a note saying that I was referred to you by so-and-so friend of mine or family member, and I'm enjoying the conversation. So please keep doing that. Got a great show lined up. Eve of the Pari and Eve duo is here. They run Gemma Talks, a brilliant channel that talks about reproductive health and broader healthcare and public policy, especially at a time when this fascist regime is cutting down healthcare access for millions of people. I don't know if you just saw, but they announced that as of April 1st, Medicare will no longer have telehealth options, which is absurd. I mean, there's no logical reason to do that, except when you're cruel and you want to make people suffer, which is unfortunately what this regime is all about. Eve will be on to talk about the lack of healthcare in this country and what we can do to fight back. And speaking of, I want to start with a story about my own daughter, which is it's kind of surreal for me right now. My wife Aisha and I have an incredible 9-year-old daughter. Uh, I've talked about this before. She suffers from a life-threatening and incurable chronic illness. Last summer, we wrote about this. It was a piece that went viral, titled "When Insurance Rejects Life-Saving Care." It was about how we've been fighting this battle for several years, and the insurance company keeps rejecting healthcare. And while we wrote that, we didn't mention the name of the company because at the time we had just submitted a claim for our daughter's medication for 2025, had upgraded to their gold plan, i.e. the most expensive plan available on the ACA. And we had hoped that just maybe this time they would approve this critical medication. We were wrong. Instead, Oscar Health sent us a notice saying that your claim has been rejected. It's been denied. Why? Because it is not medically necessary. Mind you, this is a chronic illness. There's no cure for the disease that she has. And the doctors have been explicitly clear that without this medication, she will not survive. She will die. And so it took me a minute to compose myself. And I finally decided that staying silent was not working. It was not a viable path forward. So I channeled my rage and I posted our struggle on social media. And that post went viral as well. I posted, I just got a notice from our insurance company, Oscar Health. The life-saving medication our 9-year-old daughter needs to live has been rejected because they decided, contrary to her doctor, that her medication is, quote, not medically necessary, end quote. I continued my post and I said, her meds cost about $200,000 a year. The insurance industry raked in $88 billion in profits last year. I am beyond disgusted and outraged. I'm posting full details soon on this injustice and how my wife Aisha and I are fighting back. And lo and behold, within a few hours, I get a response on Twitter from Oscar Health, the official Oscar Health account. It says, "We sincerely apologize. Our leadership team has reached out to handle this for you and your daughter. We are so sorry that this was your experience, and we want to make sure that you have what you need." And then within 12 hours, on a Sunday no less, Oscar Health called no less than 7 times, leaving multiple messages asking to speak. And just like that, miraculously, our claim was approved not just for 2025 and not just for the units of medication that we had requested. No, unlimited units indefinitely, or at least until 2099. And they sent us a letter saying your claim has been approved with unlimited units until January of 2099. For those of you who have followed my work, I've written in detail about America's violent healthcare system, which enables 68,000 annual preventable deaths. This is according to The Lancet. Enables 500,000 annual medical bankruptcies. You've seen my research debunking every single prominent myth against guaranteed universal health care as a human right. You've seen me make the case to move to a universal healthcare system because it will save us hundreds of billions of dollars, increase life expectancy, decrease maternal and infant mortality. You've read my work where I've detailed the exploitative nature of health corporations. That's what I call them: health exploitation, limited liability corporations, and how they exist not to protect our health, but to exploit our illness. Because as they deny us care, they rake in more than 88 billion annually across industries. But I share all this to prove a point. What if my wife and I were uninformed on this exploitative nature of the health insurance industry and didn't know how to get our daughter the care she needed? What if we didn't realize that Oscar Health wrongfully rejecting our claim 13 times, as they admitted to us, was illegal? What if our financial situation was one in which we could not simply tighten our belt, which we did, to afford the absurd out-of-pocket costs while trying to get our daughter the health care that she needed? What if my wife and I didn't have the time to spend literally hundreds of hours on the phone dealing with insurance bureaucrats? What if we didn't learn that the drug manufacturer can provide us the drug at a subsidized cost? What if we couldn't afford the hospital expenses that Oscar still wouldn't cover? And what if I didn't have millions of followers on social media as a platform to publicize these injustices and to publicly pressure Oscar and to humiliate them into accepting our valid claim? What would have happened to my daughter? And the fact is that these are not hypotheticals, because at least one, if not all of these questions apply to every single person in this country. None of this suffering is necessary. It is all preventable. And that can only happen when we recognize, as the vast majority of the nation has, that healthcare must be a human right, guaranteed to all people, not a for-profit enterprise for the select few. We're the only developed country on earth that doesn't have guaranteed healthcare as a human right. And so before I go to break and bring on Eve to talk about healthcare, I want to talk about just a quick couple of things that you should do. One, appeal every denial. The American Medical Association documents that more than 82% of initial rejections are overturned on appeal. Two, seek what's called peer-to-peer reviews, where your doctor speaks to the health corporation bureaucrat directly on a Zoom and have that conversation. Remember, they're not experts. The health corporations are not experts on every medical condition out there. Your doctor is. Have that peer-to-peer. Three, go directly to the drug manufacturer, as was the case for us when we were rejected in past years. When health corporations refuse to fulfill their duty, some drug manufacturers are willing to provide the drug to you directly at a lower and subsidized cost. This is not an endorsement of the big pharma industry. It's just an acknowledgement that that is an option that may exist for you. Four, publicize your story. Almost all of the above failed, but it wasn't until I publicized my story that Oscar responded. Remember when Blue Cross and Blue Shield wanted to jack up the rates of anesthesia, and the public outrage made them reconsider? Yeah, publicize your story. And then finally, be an ally to each other. Remember, this is not about MAGAs versus liberals, between progressives versus moderates. This is class warfare of the wealthy elite against working class people. If you see your neighbor, if you see somebody struggling, don't worry about their political affiliation. Don't worry about it if they're in the find out stage. Reject that cruelty, reject that lack of empathy, and just recognize that an innocent person, oftentimes a child, is suffering due to something that was completely out of their control. Elevate their story. Make sure that health corporations feel the pressure of that public backlash against their injustice. Because look, for Aisha and I, this was never about our daughter alone. It's about every single child out there and every single person out there who's denied care and needs that care because they are a human being and they deserve that human right of healthcare. It's why I spoke up loudly for universal healthcare as a human right before our daughter was diagnosed with this life-threatening illness, and why I will continue to speak up even after she ostensibly has the care that she needs. If I can help elevate your story, reach out to me. But I wanted to share these points on how you can better ensure you have the healthcare you need. When we come back from break, we're going to bring on somebody I deeply admire, an amazing leader named Eve, the other half of Pari and Eve of Gemma Talks, who have been doing brilliant work on advocating, on educating, and advancing healthcare access in the United States. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. We'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. We just got done talking about healthcare, and I'm excited to have Eve of Pari and Eve of Gemma Talks on our show today, a public health expert who's worked in this space for decades and is really one of the premier voices, particularly as it speaks to healthcare regarding reproductive health, abortion access, the basic dignity that every person deserves to make decisions over their own body. Eve, we've had your other half Pari with us in the past, about 4 months ago. It's great to have you on. How are you managing in these trying times?
Getting by. I always am not sure how to ask that question when I start conversations with people because I assume the answer is not well. But I think despite this being a really dark time in America's history, there's also a lot of opportunity, and I choose to focus on that to get through day to day than the flurry
Yeah,
of chaos and disorder that's going on.
beautiful way to look at it. I have
Yeah.
difficulty saying how are you because I know how they are if they have a
Yeah,
conscience,
exactly.
somewhat aware of what's happening. So I try to say how are you managing
How
because
are
I
you
think we're
managing? I like that. I might adopt that in my own life.
please.
Thank
Please,
you.
it makes me it makes me feel less awkward asking how are you managing as
Yeah.
opposed to how are you.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to share a bit more about your work in this space, uh, because with the state of healthcare in this country, I think the more we can elevate folks who are experts in this space is going to be important. So I'd love for you to just share a little bit about your background, your work in the space, and what you're focused on right now going forward.
Sure. I have a master's of public health in global and reproductive health. I have been working in this space for over 10 years, mostly on the global front. But since the fall of Roe v. Wade, my counterpart, Pari, and I started a social media platform to better educate the American public and build community around issues that disproportionately affect gender equality, particularly people who identify as women, and abortion rights, because we believe that part of the reason why the right to abortion fell with the overturning of the Roe v. Wade case was that um, a lot of Americans did not have a good understanding of how intersectional that healthcare issue is, to all other aspects of not only women's lives, but family dynamics, men's lives, and more. So we started the social media account that we've been running for about 2 years now. And we have been using it as a platform to keep our audiences focused on the onslaught of anti-rights legislation that passes through Congress, the attacks on state abortion funds, and honestly, we've now broadened it to larger democracy issues because if there's no democracy, which is currently failing in America, then there's also no
Yeah.
abortion rights. And that's what we're focused on right now.
I really love this point you made about the intersectionality of it. And when I'm talking to men, I make sure I point out to them that abortion is not a women's issue, it's a human rights issue. And
Yeah.
we need to be at the forefront to protect this access because it affects us in every way, shape, and form. It may not be fatal to us if we can't get access, but nonetheless, it's going to affect the people that we care about. One of the
Mhm.
data points, and you mentioned global health. One of the data points that I think shocks a lot of people is that every study ever done on abortion bans has proven that two things: abortion bans do not decrease abortion rates, and they increase maternal mortality by at least 20% or more. So if you want to kill women, and kill people and take away lives, you do that with an abortion ban.
Yeah.
Why is that not
Yes.
more common knowledge?
It's not more common knowledge because the anti-right side refuses to acknowledge it. First of all, they use misleading data to talk about how medication abortion itself is dangerous and that causes deaths, when in reality, there's like over 100 studies that talk about the safety of abortion medication.
Yep.
It's because people don't understand that regardless of whether or not it's legal for a woman to make a decision over her own body, she is going to make it. And so
Yes.
abortion bans don't stop abortions. Like you said, they just force women to get them in an unsafe manner. Nobody
Yeah.
talks about that. They think that if it's illegal, people just won't do it. But frankly, there's plenty of things that are illegal that people do anyway. So,
Yeah.
um, when it comes to healthcare, people are going to do what they need to do to take care of themselves and their families.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about that piece enough. It just makes it unsafe, and that's why women die when there's an increase in abortion bans.
I remember I ran for office for the very first time like 6 or 7 years ago, and this was 2018 or 2019, and I
Mhm.
was at an event. It was a women's event. I can't remember the exact organization. It might have been National Organization of Women, but an older woman came up to me who was in her late 80s at the time. And she said, I was a nurse for 60 years, and I remember the time before Roe, and I remember the unsafe abortions that I had to treat, and the women who were bleeding out in front of me. And
Mhm.
literally,
Mhm.
this sweet old lady literally begging me, she goes, just do everything you can to make sure we protect abortion access because we can't go back to that. And she
Yeah.
was the first person I thought of when I saw that Roe fell, and it was pretty clear it was going to, and the opinion was leaked, which by the way, my theory is that it was leaked on purpose by the conservative justices to
Oh,
kind of
a
the
hundred
blows.
percent. A
Um,
100%.
but you're right, that's the part that isn't as often spoken about. And maybe it's because people are embarrassed or shy or feel like they're uninformed. But that's to bring it back to you, that's why your voice is so important. And your platform that you've launched a couple of years ago already has hundreds of thousands of followers.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
make a quick plug. How can folks follow you? We're gonna do it again at the end of the show, but how can folks follow you here?
Yeah.
Because I want to go follow you right now there.
I would love that. Our social media account handle is Gemma_talks with a G, Gemma. You can also find us on Substack. We have a Repro Ready activist newsletter that goes out every 2 weeks. And we've also launched a podcast called Women in America, where we talk about the intersectional issues of being a woman in America, which is a lot of fun in a
I love
dark
it.
way. I say
Yeah.
a lot of dark humor fun.
Dark humor is the best kind of humor. I love it.
Uh, Honestly, it's a
But
coping mechanism these days,
it,
so that's how we
telling you,
get by.
without levity, we would all lose our minds. So it's, I remember
Yeah.
the first time my oldest is 16 right now. The first time he told me a dark humor joke was, he goes, uh, he goes to me, why did the chicken cross the road? I'm like, why? He goes, to get to the other side. Like to indicate that the chicken was killing itself. I'm like, my God, that's dark. What
Yes.
you're
Wait, I
like,
love that you can remember this for the rest of his life and reference his first sarcasm, like dark humor
yes,
joke.
yes. It was brilliant. He was like 6, maybe 7 years old. I'm like, what happened to you that at 6 and 7 you're already into dark
Uh,
humor? That's usually like a
he
midlife
learns from
crisis.
the best. He learns
Yeah.
from you.
My, my dad jokes are meant to be corny and eye rolling, not dark humor. But I still
Uh,
remember it now, 10 years later. It's brilliant.
that's
Um,
funny.
let, let's talk about what folks should be doing right now. I mean, we're seeing
Yeah.
states either refusing to adopt Medicaid expansion, which is devastating to low-income people, devastating to women who need healthcare access, particularly reproductive healthcare access. And now we're seeing the federal government basically trying to defund Medicaid altogether and Social Security and Medicare and all these
Yeah.
critical social safety net programs. Why? Because Elon Musk apparently needs another $1 trillion tax cut. It's absurd. It's disgusting.
Obviously,
It's
obviously.
obvious. And just quick sidebar, the fact that this guy's worth I don't know how many hundreds of bajillions of dollars, and his former partner can't get a hold of him for their child's life-threatening medical care. Like it just goes to
Sucks.
show that it's not money or lack thereof that makes somebody a deadbeat dad. It's just being a
Yeah.
jackass is why you're a deadbeat
Yeah.
dad. It's insane to me
Yeah.
that that kind of person that he is.
Literally no, I mean,
I'm just
outside of taking care of his own children, like literally no compassion, no empathy. I saw this like cartoon online the other day that was really telling, where he was like standing on top of a pile of money, holding a sign that said, y'all are parasites, and then a bunch of, normal people down at the bottom who are like, we need health care. Like,
yeah,
we're not
yeah,
asking for that much. We're not
I
asking
know.
for that much.
It's wild. I don't get, I think there's got to be like some kind of a psychological study of the narcissism. I feel like these billionaires think that they're going to be immortal, that they're going to live forever,
Yeah.
that their money can be injected into their veins as like some antidote to aging. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be some kind of like a mental health psychosis. Like, and maybe that's not the politically right answer, but I need something Like you can't just be that cruel on your own. There's got to be something
Yeah.
fundamentally wrong with you to be that cruel and that just delusional. But anyway, back to the point at
Yeah.
hand.
Sorry, I have one last comment on that, which was
Yes.
one of the only ways that I got through our Cheeto in charge's first presidency was the volume of podcast episodes where people brought on psychologists who psychoanalyzed Trump himself. And I
Yeah.
got so much joy out of that because all of them were like, he is a psychopath. At
Yes.
bare minimum, a sociopath. But
Yes.
uh, those analyses gave me life.
One of my friends, Dean Obeidullah, has a great point about Trump that he's not an aberration of
No.
the Republican Party. He's a manifestation of it. And the more you think
Yeah.
about it, right? The more you think about, well, there's never been a Republican president in modern America that's been this racist. Well, Ronald Reagan referred to Africans as monkeys.
Hmm.
And because, well, there's never been one who's been so aggressively targeting minority communities. Well, Ronald Reagan called the AIDS virus the gay virus, and how many people died as a result of his cruelty in that respect. Well, there's been nobody who's, engaged with, fascists and extremists. Well, Ronald Reagan funded the Taliban and then brought them to the White House and called them the modern day Thomas Jefferson. Like you can tie it all back to that. Well, there's been nobody who's been this cruel in economic policy. Well, Ronald Reagan literally started the trickle down scamonomics, and you can just go on and
Hmm.
on. I can't remember her
Scamming.
name, but there's a young woman on TikTok who takes every crisis in America and traces it right back to Ronald Reagan. The war on drugs, the war on welfare, it all goes right
Yeah.
back to him. The only difference between Reagan and Trump, there's two differences. Reagan had better hair, and he was slightly more competent. That's basically it. Otherwise, they're the exact same person.
That is such
They're-
a niche social media platform. I want to find that
I
creator.
know it's just, but it's so accurate. So anyway, we
Yeah.
we keep getting
Okay.
sidebarred, but action items. What should folks be doing right now to protect their healthcare? And I know your specialty is reproductive health. So let's start there.
Yeah.
What kind of resources do folks have available? How should they be thinking about the next couple of months or years?
Yeah. Because you mentioned Medicaid, I just want to start with a brief factoid on that, which is that the anti-choice and conservative Republicans have this talking point that they don't want tax dollars going towards funding abortion.
Hmm.
That has been illegal for decades and it's not allowable through Medicaid. So US tax dollars do not go towards funding abortion. And I just want that to be very clear because it is a main talking point of the Conservative
Yes.
Party. It is already illegal. So whenever and wherever that is brought up, it's complete. Am I allowed to curse on this show? Like BS.
By all means. By all means.
It is
Yes. Great
such
thing.
bullshit. It drives me. It's just rhetoric because
Yeah.
it gets people all excited about legislation that is entirely unnecessary because it's already illegal. So that being set aside, no tax dollars go towards funding abortion. They haven't
Great
for
point.
years.
Great point.
What I will say in about what people can do is two things. I know that a lot of folks, especially in the repro space, are kind of sick of hearing, well, you can donate money, which I will reiterate is one of the number one things you can do, especially to abortion funds, your local abortion funds. But the other two things I would say is abortion funds often work with what we call practical support networks. And these practical support networks are oftentimes volunteer coordinated, volunteer organized, unpaid networks that help people get from their home to their appointment, from their hotel to their appointment, um, that help them find food credit, that help them. Sometimes we'll train people up to be doulas. So a lot of people might be familiar with doulas
Yeah.
in terms of giving birth, but there's also abortion doulas. And a lot of these practical support networks will give training and resources to be an abortion doula where you can go sit with a patient who wants someone other than a doctor in the room who may have traveled from a restrictive state to a protective state, knows nobody in the city where they're having their abortion performed and wants like a friendly face. So I would highly recommend that people, if you want to volunteer in this space, look up practical support networks. They're often linked to from your local abortion fund, and you can find ways to dedicate your time, to dedicate your, you know, car driving people around, to dedicate yourself to help connect people with resources when they're visiting, to have health services. That is one great way you can, dedicate to the cause.
I love that because you're right. I mean, look, money makes the world go round. And
Mhm.
one of the reasons why Roe was overturned is because these right-wingers spent billions, I mean,
Mhm.
literally billions of dollars over the last half century, and Democrats were caught flat-footed thinking, oh, it'll never
Mhm.
happen, which is absurdly
Mhm.
stupid. Um, and and I've said this before, I feel like Democrats are like Charlie Brown and Lucy, and Republicans are like the football, and they're like, this time we promise we'll play by the rules and
I
do things the
know.
right way. And Democrats are like, all right, okay, you fooled me 17 times, but I trust you won't do it the 18th time. And then they just fall flat on their ass, and we're like, oh, how do we
Yeah.
get here? Let's work
Yeah.
harder. Um, but to your point, like the money aspect is important. And so for those of means, please contribute, and don't think
Yeah.
that, well, $5 is not going to make a difference, because you're damn right it will.
It
And
does.
then likewise, that's not the only way. You can invest your time. You can invest in just being there is a critical component. Some of the
Mhm.
legislation that's coming out is truly draconian. South Carolina Republicans came out a piece of legislation that fortunately did not make it out of committee, but the fact that they keep introducing it, that would allow uh, that would categorize an abortion as a capital offense, as first degree
Mhm.
murder. And
Mhm.
given that South Carolina has upheld the death penalty, the logical result is a woman receives an abortion, gets an abortion, and boom, she's on trial for murder in the first, capital punishment, right? Like, we're so pro-life, we will literally execute you if you don't agree with us on
Mhm.
pro-life. I don't know if you saw this new bill that was just filed in Missouri, HB
Mhm.
807. Um,
Mhm.
it will, quote, maintain a central registry of each expectant mother who is at risk for seeking an abortion of her unborn child, and make the same available to a prospective adoptive parent who has completed screenings.
Yeah.
I just,
Saw that.
I don't know if you've heard of this, but what's your reaction to something like this?
Not surprised, to be honest, because especially the Missouri legislation was
Yes.
literally proposed in Project 2025.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we've been screaming about this during Trump's campaign. Also, not surprised about the Missouri legislation, specifically because they are trying to position crisis pregnancy centers to run
Mhm.
those registries. And for people who aren't tuned into this, crisis pregnancy centers are unlicensed, unregistered, I'm using air quotes, health facilities, because
Yeah.
they are not by any means providing health care,
No.
um, that are usually funded by religious networks, by churches, and ironically, by US taxpayer dollars, because they are
Every
religious
accusation is a
organizations.
confession. Every MAGA accusation is a
Yes.
confession. And this is another example of
Yeah.
it.
And so, what these crisis pregnancy centers do in the aftermath of the Roe v. Wade overturning, they now outnumber actual medical abortion clinics like 3 to 1 or 4 to 1, which is disgusting. And they are specifically set up to mislead. They prey on pregnant women to come in and redirect them away from abortion services. They don't provide any care after a woman decides to keep the pregnancy and give birth. And
Yep.
so, but conservative legislators and Christian churches love these places because they're taxpayer dollars that are being funded through them. So, this Missouri legislation has positioned crisis pregnancy centers to run the registries because they are infamous for mishandling patient data. They collect their name, location, gestational age, last menstrual cycle, all of these things, and they are not subjected to the same uh, regulations that health clinics are. So they really don't have to protect any of that data, which makes it them an easy source of information to share this with the state of Missouri.
It's
That's
like
what I think
modern.
about that.
Yes. Well, thank you for articulating it so clearly. It's modern day human trafficking by any other
It
name.
is. Yeah.
And we study, and by the way, if you're just tuning in, we're speaking to Eve of the Pari and Eve duo of Gemma Talks. Follow them on social media at Gemma_talks. When we look at American history, for example, we see overt legislation of
Mhm.
relocation for indigenous people, adoption schemes for enslaved people and formerly enslaved people, the denial of education, and the rise of Christian boarding schools where they would be stripped of their heritage, their culture, denied. I often remind folks that up to 1/3 of the Africans enslaved were Muslim who spoke Arabic, and they were denied the ability and the right to know their own language and their own ancestry. This has kind of been par for the course. And what we're seeing now with these fake clinics that you just mentioned is that same strategy just modified in a different way. And now, rather than waiting for the child to be 10 or 12 years old before taking them away or stripping them away, they found a way to monetize forced birth. And
Mm-hmm.
and you're right, it's those taxpayer dollars that they're collecting, the untaxed, absurd amounts of money that these mega churches are pulling in. And to me, that in and of itself is outrageous enough. It's disgusting, it's outrageous, it's mortifying. One of the definitions of genocide is exactly that. It's taking children from a community. But further adding to that insult and that injury is the fact that there is no support for prenatal care. There's no support for healthcare. There's no support for child pre-K, no support for free lunches, no support for a living wage, no support for housing access, no support or thought given to the impacts of climate injustice on low-income Black and brown communities. I mean, it's basically, we're going to force this human being out of you one way or another, and then make them suffer into that same cycle of poverty, so that when they are also conceiving a child, we force them. And this is a perpetual, human trafficking machine. It's I'm just now spitting off the cuff, but it's almost like the movie The Matrix about machines forcing humans to reproduce just to have more energy. It's like the exact same concept, except it's just more money for these folks. And that's why I admire the work you're doing, Eve, because you're providing insight to folks on how to kind of recognize this first of all, and then take meaningful action as well. On the local level, and this rant is coming to this question, on the local level, talk to me. There's a Reddit subreddit that says, explain it to me like I'm five. Explain it to me like I'm five. If I've never been involved before and I'm realizing, okay, I really need to be involved, what are the very basic block and tackle steps to get involved? How do I get involved? Who do I call? What's the first couple of steps I should be taking right now?
Before I answer that, I want to address one thing that you just said, which is it's not about life. It's never been about life for the pro-life side, because they do not give a fuck about what happens after the baby is born. They do not care. Which is ironic, because I always thought when I was younger and before I went into this field of study that they were building a forced birth workforce, which I can understand as like a horrible conservative goal, but they are not even fulfilling that goal, because they're not providing young people, children, or mothers the resources that are necessary to build a healthy workforce. They're just forcing birth, and then you're on your own after that. So Pari and I say it's never been about the sanctity of life, and always about control. It's just about control.
100%. 100% right.
And so I think as a baseline step, it's important for people to acknowledge that, to know that, the other side of things that we're fighting has nothing to do with saving babies' lives. And it's just about controlling women.
And one of the other pieces of evidence, and I know I cut you off, but just to add to your point, 9 of the top 10 states with the highest infant mortality rates are red states that ban abortion or restrict abortion access, and have the highest maternal mortality rate as well. And it's 3x higher for Black and Indigenous women. And 9 of the top 10 states with the lowest infant and maternal mortality rates are blue states, which, shocker, provide abortion and reproductive health access. It's like, what a concept. When you provide healthcare, people live longer. Like, mind-blowing, right? Like, this should be a Nobel Prize discovery. But for these folks, and that's a sarcastic comment, for these folks, like, they can't understand the very fundamental basic point that we're providing healthcare. And the same, by the way, goes for overall life expectancy. Blue states have a 2 to 5 year longer life expectancy than red states, because we're actually prioritizing that healthcare. And it's just the cruelty of it is just revolting, and it makes me want to throw up.
And it's not, I almost right before we got on this call, I try not to scroll through our social media comments because they're often really gross, but I caught a comment right before we got on this call where we had started discussing, there was a study that just came out around how the infant mortality in red states is, or in Texas, I think specifically has increased.
Yeah.
And one of the comments was something to the effect of, well, abortion kills babies, so like that's infant mortality from the start. Like you're not even giving babies a chance to grow. And I'm like, so you are sitting here, the essence of your comment is that you're acknowledging that with abortion bans come increased infant mortality, but you would rather see this pregnancy come to term and then make you know, the baby suffer after birth
Yeah.
until it's subjected to such bad conditions that it is going to die anyway.
Yeah.
But they just want to see the baby born. They just want to see it born. And it
There's
blew my mind. I was like, okay, there is such cognitive dissonance here where we are telling you that it's causing infant mortality and you are like, I don't care. I just want it to be born because if it's not
yeah.
born, it's murder. I'm like, what are you talking about?
But it's your point, Eve, that it's about control. It's not about life. They just
Yeah.
want to be able to control. And I don't know if you saw this,
Yeah.
because if the argument is that, hey, a fertilized egg, that's life, right? It's life,
Yeah.
it's flourishing. If that's the argument, well, the argument also goes then an individual sperm cell is life as well. And in Ohio, they introduced the Conception Begins at Erection Act. I don't know if you saw this or not, but it's it would criminalize ejaculation without the intent to conceive.
Hmm.
And it's to me like, yes, let's actually push that bill forward to show
Yeah.
how ridiculous it actually is. And my argument always is, whatever your definition of when life begins, whatever it is, let's say you believe life begins at conception, or whether you think it's after the first trimester, as Roe held, essentially, right? I think it misses the point. The fundamental point is there are so many nuances to every individual person's healthcare situation and condition. Does it make more sense to you for a one size fits all bureaucratic government mandate that this is how it's going to be? Or does it make more sense to you that you and your healthcare provider and your physician and your family and your loved ones get to have that independence and that autonomy and that trust? And so for me, that's fundamentally what it comes down to. If you don't trust women, just say you don't trust women, but don't give me this
Hmm.
crap about when life begins or not. You just fundamentally don't think women are capable enough to make decisions about their own bodies. And if that's the case, you've got some serious issues and you should have no place access to any power whatsoever.
Yeah. I want to point out something that we get a lot in our work from critics is abortion is your whole personality. Why is this one issue your whole personality? You're a psychopath. Like it's one, and you likely know somebody who's had an abortion. If you don't, it's probably because you are not a safe space for them to
Yeah,
tell you.
sure. Toxic
That's how
person.
common it is, right?
Right.
But the other reason why I will say in quotes, because I don't know if I like this characterization yet, but abortion is our whole personality, is because of what you said, where we see abortion rights as a larger marker for how a country treats its women and
Right.
gender equality. So if you don't believe in abortion access, you don't believe what you just said, that entrusting women to make decisions about their own bodies, which means you think that women are less than, that they don't have
Yes.
good judgment, that they are making decisions about their body flippantly. And that is a larger gender equality marker. So I don't see this talking about intersectionality as just an abortion rates issue. It is a gender equality issue, it is a democracy issue. And until we start looking at it as such, we will continue to have these very siloed pro choice, pro life, pro birth discussions, which is, I think, what holds back the larger movement oftentimes.
That's exactly well said. I was looking up of a quote by, I think it's by Paul Eldridge. I'm sorry, by Tony Benn, Canada, and it doesn't relate to abortion, but it speaks to this broader point you're making, where he says the way a government treats refugees is very instructive because it shows you how they would treat the rest of us if they thought they could get away with it.
Yep.
And that applies here as well, on something as critical as reproductive health access and just healthcare in general. The way the government treats a particularly marginalized, or I don't want to say powerless, but a community that's been denied power, denied access to the halls of power, it's instructive of how they would treat everybody else as well. And so that's where I go to men that until and unless you get your head out of your ass and actually do something productive in this space, it's going to destroy your life as well. So even if you're just the most selfish person out there, you should still be incentivized to say, hey, we should just trust women and get the hell out of the way and stop forcing women to live under the shadow of men and let women have the independent autonomy, or that's even the wrong way to say it. Ensure women have the independent autonomy that every human being fundamentally deserves. Eve, we're out of time, but I wanted to still ask you to take just a minute and talk about just how do I get started? Like, I don't know anything about this stuff, but I just know it's wrong. How do I get started? And then share how folks can reach out to you and connect with you on social media to keep the conversation going.
Sure. I think the most important thing right now is to educate yourself. And I know that can be particularly challenging in this, what we call infodemic, like a mass crisis of misinformation, but there are trusted sources that you can follow. I'm not just plugging myself, but particularly like your local ACLU chapter, who will tell you when they're coming up with, new lawsuits to fight legislation. Because abortion rights was returned to the states, the most important thing you can do right now is track what your congressional members are doing, especially if you live in a red state. Very quickly, I had one of our podcast episodes was with the Democratic whip, Catherine Clark, and she said that her office is getting 3,000 calls a day versus 40 prior to a lot of this chaos, which is great. And she encourages, but she already supports these issues. People in red states need to be calling their red legislators who are causing all of these issues, whether it pertains to Trump, Musk, abortion, whatever. So the most important thing is tracking your local issues and calling your congressional members, especially if you live in a Republican state. As a trusted source of information, they can also follow Gemma Talks. So they can find us on @Gemma_Talks. We're on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Threads. We have a growing Blue Sky account, and they can subscribe to our Repro Ready newsletter on Substack.
Outstanding. Eve, I really deeply appreciate and cherish the work you do. I'm a human rights lawyer. I consider the work you're doing human rights work, and it's literally life-saving. So thank you. And I know it's never easy. I know you deal with a lot of crap and hate and violence from people who are just absolutely toxic and just not good people, but you press on. And I wanted to just acknowledge that publicly, because people need to understand the work you're doing is not, it's a labor of love, and it's something that it comes from a deep place of passion and sincerity. And it's my privilege to have you on here, and we hope that we can have you back on soon as well.
I would love that. And thank you for saying that, because we always need to hear reiterated the complimentary stuff to counter all of the shitstorm of hate we get online. So we appreciate you, Qasim.
Everyone listening, send Eve and Pari your love. Go to Gemma Talks, follow them, and send them a note of how awesome they are. This is Eve of Eve and Pari of Gemma Talks. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126. The most awesome show in the multiverse. We'll be right back after this break, where I want to dive into this absurd story out of Florida of a Jewish American who shot at what he thought were two Palestinian Americans, who ended up being two Israeli Jewish people, who then went on social media and blamed Arabs and said death to Arabs for them being shot at by a Jewish American person. Yeah, it's wild. When we come back, we'll dive in. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126. the most awesome show in the multiverse. If you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button so we can continue this advocacy. That was Eve of Eve. Follow them across social media at Gemma_Talks. Brilliant leader at a much critical time in this country. As we close out, I want to talk about anti-Semitism, anti-Arab hate, Islamophobia. Bizarre story out of Florida. A Jewish American named Mordechai Brafman fired 17 shots at two people, believing them to be Palestinian. He then confessed to the police, "I killed two Palestinian men." In reality, he didn't kill them. His bullets grazed them, a father-son duo. One was shot in the left forearm, the other shot in the shoulder. But here's the bizarre twist. His victims were not Palestinians. They weren't Arabs, they weren't Muslims, they were Israeli Jews. A father and son, the Rabies, Rabeys. And then after surviving this attack by a Jewish American gunman, Ari Rabi, one of the victims, goes on Facebook and he says, "Dear Jews, they tried to kill us for nationalistic reasons. This is anti-Semitism. Death to the Arabs." Yeah. So first of all, the police affidavit states, "It should be noted," and I'm quoting, "It should be noted that while in custody in our interview room, the defendant, Mordechai Brafman, spontaneously stated that while he was driving his truck, he saw two Palestinians and shot and killed both," end quote. So let's be clear what happened. A Jewish American man nearly killed two Israeli Jews because he thought they were Palestinian Arab Muslims, and the victims instead still blamed the Arabs for the attack, calling for their death. In other words, the victims didn't condemn the would-be murderer for trying to murder them because his intent is one that they apparently agree with, i.e., death to Arabs. Adding to this absurdity, yes, it doesn't stop here. In Florida, where this shooting happened, right now, this guy, Brafman, is being charged with 2 counts of attempted second-degree murder. Meanwhile, in Florida, Brianna Boston, a mother of 3 who has no history of violence, doesn't even own a firearm, said, "Delay, deny, defend, you're next," to Blue Cross and Blue Shield when they denied her health insurance claim. And she is being charged with terrorism. And she's in house arrest because she said, "Delay, deny, defend." The most that Brafman can get is 15 years if he's convicted. But she can also get 15 years. So explain to me, how are empty words deserving of the same punishment as shooting at 2 people 17 times, hitting them, and nearly killing them? Why is it terrorism to verbally express nonviolent frustration to a health insurance company, but not terrorism to fight 17 times in broad daylight with the intent to kill 2 people because you thought they were Arab Palestinian Muslims? You just imagine if the roles were reversed. It would be headline news, but instead there's no mass political movement, no national media outcry, no politicians have demanded it. We're even not sure if Brafman will be charged with hate crime charges. That's how messed up this actually is. If you go on my Substack, I provide an email and a phone number you can call to the hate crimes division of the Miami State's Attorney's Office to ensure that they do prosecute this as an actual hate crime, because that's what this is. The cycle of dehumanization and misinformation and bigotry does not make Jewish Americans safer, does not make Palestinian Americans safer. Indeed, it makes life safer for nobody. It makes it worse for all of us. And while nobody was killed in this vile attack, we've all witnessed the horror of mass murder from mass shootings. And that's why we must stand united against all forms of bigotry and hate, my friends, against anti-Semitism, against Islamophobia, against anti-Arab bigotry alike. And we must demand that this guy, this ostensibly hate crime terrorist, Mordechai Brafman, is held fully accountable under the law. Anything less sends a chilling message that such hate crimes against Arabs and Palestinians are okay, which is horrifying. So call, email, share, post your network, and let's get them to act. All right, my friends, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Grateful for your support, grateful for your ongoing advocacy for human rights and justice and standing in solidarity with me. We will continue to advance a show that builds on compassion and justice and accountability for those in power. Got a powerful show lined up for next week. Be sure to tune in, same time, same place at 10 a.m. Eastern on Sunday on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. And if you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button. My friends, be fierce, lead with compassion and justice, and continue speaking truth to power. Until next week, peace.